Welcome back to another episode of the Zero Signal podcast, where it is our job to bring the best so that you can be at your best as a security leader. Stu, how's this day finding you today?
Today is good. We survived another snowstorm, and that might blow when this episode is released, but we're surviving another snowstorm here in the Northeast. And I, for one, cannot wait for sunnier pastures at RSA. So looking forward to that. How about you, Connor?
RSA this year for me is going to be really special. Every year I go, I'm always trying to hang out with the cool kids. And this year I get to facilitate all the cool kids. So I'm running 5 different micro events at RSA, everything from the CISO breakfast that you and I are running, where we're going to facilitate a whole conversation, like how people onboard AI into their security programs. I've got another one that we're facilitating with a threat research team from SysDig, which is about how threat actors are using AI. We're doing one for our customers, basically a cyber advisory board that's just not boring, where we're going to talk around what's going on in new product, what we're doing with autonomous threat hunting in the platform. That's going on. Got a happy hour we're doing on Tuesday. And then we're doing something else that I'm really interested for RSA as well, is got a panel, got an event. It's not for CISOs. It's going to be a shocking concept. It's going to take RSA by storm. It's like there are actually other executives at this conference than just CISOs. So that's going to be our Wednesday conference.
Nice.
We'll put it on the socials and everything, but I'm looking forward to this RSA. It's going to be nuts.
Amazing. Well, look, let's fast forward to another cool kids group and get this week's guests in.
So last week or a few episodes ago, we had Mike Privet on, right? And we had that passing comment of how many AI startups there have been at RSA, and specifically AI for the SOC. And it was like, wow, there's a lot of attention around this particular problem set. So I'm really excited to talk about our guests who are coming on, because they've got a really amazing approach for solving this problem set. I don't think it's any shock to our listeners here that everyone is wrestling with an operational crisis within the modern security stack, right? We've got alert overload, we've got analyst burnout, you got SOC teams that are getting thousands of alerts a day, and most of them are going uninvestigated because human teams can't keep up. And so that's going to be the backdrop of today's conversation. So I'm particularly proud, I'm particularly excited to bring on these 2 guests. So today we're joined by Seth Summersett, the co-founder and CEO of Embed Security, and Jeffrey Johns, the co-founder and CTO. Together, they launched Embed in 2024 after careers spanning, and I am not making this up, they had NSA, FireEye, Mandiant, Google, Meta. I mean, it's a hell of a resume and a lot of lived experience here. So, and they stepped out to go build a company, which I think is really interesting, which is really organized around helping the overwhelmed analysts break through the noise of all these alerts and use agentic AI with human oversight, giving operators transparency and control. So with that, Seth, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Good to be here, Connor.
Like I said in the intro, I'm really excited to have you guys in here because we've seen a lot of people on the show floor say, I can slam AI into this problem and we're going to magic our way out of alert fatigue. And clearly, no one believes that we can do this, but that's the narrative that's come out here. I want to get your reaction to this, but I was reading one of the many studies that goes around this topic, and I'm seeing reports the average SOC analyst seeing 4,500 alerts a day, or spending 3 hours a day in manual alert triage, where they're not actually doing anything about it. They're just figuring out what to do about this. So I really want to dive into this. But Seth, Jeff, maybe you guys can just pause here and just ground the audience in what Embed Security is trying to solve for. And then I'd love to hear a little bit about your guys' careers. Because when we were prepping for the show, it was just mind-blowing what you guys have seen before you decided to build Embed Security.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the opportunity to chat about it. At Embed, really what we're trying to do is build, what we like to call the security control plane. And what we're really hoping to do with that is help organizations cut their investigation time and alert noise, like you referenced earlier. And really what that does at the core is it helps organizations handle 2, 3, 4, 10 times as many alerts per analyst, right? And so we really want to make it so organizations don't miss the real threats, right? By spending all of their time stuck in false positives. And so we've talked about this a lot. We hear about this a lot. I mean, my career has been spent watching teams just get bogged down in this, right? And either leaving due to the repetitive work or leaving due to burnout of just like never feeling like they can get ahead.
That same report that I was citing, there was other statistics like 74% of the SOC analysts thought this is how life is, and 67% of them were looking for a new job. It was just like, yep, we're doing it the way we're supposed to, and I want to leave. So clearly something isn't working the way we're doing it. So Jeff and John, Seth, I want to hear a little bit more about like why you went after this problem space. I mean, clearly there's this time at the NSA, there's FireEye, there's Mandiant there. Like, can you give us a little bit like why you guys decided to go down this path of attacking this problem space?
Yeah, I'll kind of give my perspective here first, Connor. I've been in security now for 15 years and AI and machine learning for longer than that. I think everyone looks at it like detection is, here to stay forever. That is a problem that will continue to go on, to infinity. And investigation is really the bottleneck at this point. Got to experience that early on at the agency. And when we were looking at security automation challenges there, and then again at Mandiant, right, with the managed defense business at Mandiant, and see how they've tried to manage that crushing problem of all the alerts that you have to look through, and just a tremendous opportunity. I think we saw it when we were at Mandiant and interested in that problem. But with a lot of the technology that's come out here in the last, not just LLMs, but other technology, really felt like, we have a good chance to make a dent on that problem. And so, kind of for me personally, it's a challenge. It's a hard problem. Obviously, the industry hasn't solved this problem yet. But it's one that you can make people's lives a lot better. There's 67% of people who want to, go do something else. And then for organizations, really help them reduce risk too at the same time. So I think, the challenge plus, making a true dent on the problem is kind of what motivated me.
When I was at Clear, and before that Apollo, part of the program I built was building out detection engineering. And, this is the very early days of SOAR. We were still very SIM driven. And it was like, yeah, good SIM. The goal was like just onboard as many of the alerts as you could so that you could say you had detection coverage. How much of that has changed today? Is that still the world today? I would just like to get a sense of like you're working with customers, you see the problem pretty closely. When you walk into an organization and they're trying to solve this problem of threat detection, is so much of it, is it more bespoke or is it just like, hey, we have a SIM, we're just trying to get it operationalized?
There's a pretty good mix there, probably more than what you would want to think this far down the road. And I'm never not surprised when I go into an organization and I find that they're still just trying to get stuff that I thought was kind of dialed in 10 years ago. So honestly, it really just depends on the org that you go into. I've seen really large orgs that are still just trying to get their SIM working, and I've seen very small orgs that are super dialed in, and I'm really impressed with what they're doing. I think what we're seeing right now, though, is a big shift in the way that teams are working. Like, I think we're shifting, what's possible. The AI and ML changes that have come over the last, it's more than just even, and Jeff will go into much more detail about this than me, but it's more than just LLMs, right? There's been a number of advancements over the last decade that have really enabled us to do some really cool stuff. And that is changing where people spend their time. And what I mean by that is, rather than, you having a team of 5 analysts that just sit down every day and, just triage alerts all day long, just to get through as many as they can to pop them onto the queue. With AI SOC technologies like Embed, you now have the ability to shift that workload to other parts of the security stack.
I will add to that, like, it is interesting that, people think the birth of LLMs is the birth of data science because now it's become accessible to folks who, like, can't code, like guilty as well. But like the stuff I can do with Claude and I lose a lot of time doing it, then it's not always productive. But by theory, that these problems were being attacked years ago, right? It's just become a lot more accessible to folks who haven't done it, which I think is fascinating. And again, talk about Connor's program at Clear, and Jeff at the bleeding edge of this, like the NSA and Mandiant, which is Google, which is FireEye. So Kevin did pretty well out of some of those transactions. But this work has been happening. Like the technology itself is not like, it's amazing, but it's also like the challenge hasn't changed. Seth, I did want to kind of hone in on something you said there. Like, this work can be put on other areas of the business. You folks talk a lot about security analyst burnout, fatigue. Do you think there's a shift in what a security analyst is or does versus, let's say, 10 years ago when it was to configure Splunk or whatever it may be? Like, do you think 2028, 2030 security analysts looks different to today and yesteryear?
I definitely do. And I think we're even seeing that shift here pretty early, right? I think it's much like what you see for software developers to some extent, right? Is they are reading a lot more code now than what they're writing. And I think you're going to see the similar types of stuff, at least in Security Operations Center, where analysts are validating stuff a lot more than they are doing the full investigation and running down all the details themselves. Jeff, you may have some other perspectives there.
No, I think you're spot on. I do think it's going to be a shift. As people augment, what they're doing with AI, it naturally kind of changes your perspective on things. One of our kind of tenets really is about showing our work right everywhere, so that people continue to see exactly the data, that the evidence that we're relying on for the decisions in our models. And I think that's important too for people, right? As they maybe spending a little bit less time on those investigations, but if you give them that view, right, they still can stay tied to the data, tied to those groundings that they were experiencing before, right? It really that's kind of one of our principles.
So I'd like to explore this a little farther, because I think there's a really important and deliberate design choice you guys are making. It's something that I've talked about a lot around. You need observability if you're going to have governance. So I want to just hold that thought for a second and just round out this idea of the future of an analyst. Now, there's two camps I see the conversation breaking into. One is there is no human analyst anymore, right? You're able to just basically abstract that work away through systems and process, and they're going to handle it. The analyst, as we know it today, goes away. Two, there's a transformation of the analyst, like what it means to be a security operator, what it means to go through detection response and do incident response goes there. I'd love to get your perspectives on where you think goes here. And if you are in camp number two, what does this mean for an analyst who's coming into the field today and trying to skill up for where the market's going in 3 years, 5 years' time?
So we're a little bit more in the camp that right now, like given today's technology, there is still a human in the loop. And so the analyst is still there and is still part of it. What we've seen is that our technology, leveraging what we call chain of evidence, like Jeff is talking about showing the work that we've done, actually really helps to upskill analysts much, much faster. So we work with the University of Montana, and they train student analysts. And then those student analysts can come up to speed, leveraging our platform really, really quickly, because they see, well, how did Embed investigate this? What did Embed think about this? Why did Embed think this was good, was not bad, or was bad? And so then they can leverage that to learn really, really quickly and upskill really quickly. So I think the skills are still similarly necessary, right? Like if you're going to validate if an investigation is correct, you still need to know how to do an investigation.
When a analyst is starting to the next generation of analysts are coming our way, how much of their time and energy do you think they should be spending towards data engineering versus something else up the value chain? I'm just curious to get your perspective. We have a lot of people who reach out to Stu for career advice, or Stu's team for career advice, and say, hey, I'm going, or you have hiring managers who are like, I need to get the right calibration. What's the qualities of the people who are going to succeed? as we reimagine what detection response looks like. Do you have like a perspective on those security operators who are really going to stand out in the coming years? Like, what are you seeing are the ingredients that's going to help them win?
Yeah, that's a great question. From my perspective, I come from a data background, so to me, I think data is extremely important, and I think that's going to continue to be extremely important to the way that they do their job as analysts. So even at Embed, when analysts are reviewing that stuff, they need to. It's important that they help the system to learn, right? So we're gathering context, whether that context is through public data sources, whether that's organizational context, or whether that context is through why the alert or the case that we investigated was right or wrong, right? The more precise they are in what they're providing the system, the better the results they're going to get out of it. And so I think that them understanding that will be a key to them being a good analyst as AI SOC becomes the default standard in a security operations center. But Jeff, you probably have a few more things to add there, maybe.
No, I think that's a great answer, Seth. I think the organizational context and thinking about how that plugs into, these AI SOC models downstream is key, right? And so I think people, who naturally think like that in terms of, the sequence of things that you need to draw the conclusion, right, are ones that will kind of readily get that and figure, okay, this is context that needs to be part of what gets reasoned over by these systems. And so, absolutely, that's a big part of it.
Context is such a good word because whilst there's like different interpretations of it, they're actually all very relevant to what's going to make a good security analyst, understanding the business, training the systems, and like on top of that, like understanding like the justification of your why, right? I think curiosity, like the main reason people get really good at this job is not because they do what they're told to do. They want to know the second and third order effects of what they're doing. Like, what happens if I push this button and where do we go from here? And what happens if I don't push this button? So I think that context, whilst it has multiple reasons, like is going to continue to drive context and curiosity. It sounds like a crap slogan, but like they're the two things that I think are always going to drive the next level of intelligence analysts. And curiosity, like systems will always change, but we work in a network of people who like kind of want to test boundaries and understand reasoning. And the greatest people will just continue to push those boundaries. And that does not come from not understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And I see plenty of people that get lost in big organizations because they're just doing the thing that's in front of them because that's what the textbook says. And they actually have no, back to it, like context as to why they're doing it.
I think this moment of transformation, my view of the world, is that threat modeling is going to become fun again. Like threat modeling is going to become essential again, not a fun. It was never really fun. It's going to become essential because to your point, it's like if you could understand where the business is trying to go, cool, I got the business outcomes. Now I can understand the business process. We just had Jay on from SAP come on. And he was talking about like how his organization starts with understanding the business first, get all the processes, then you get to the technology. So I can only imagine as an analyst, knowing what the objectives of the business are, knowing the business process around it, and then being able to feed that context back into the systems, whether that's like, context engineering, or even as you're describing, Seth, just that small amounts of feedback, the thumbs up, thumbs down, I don't disagree, I think we should go over here or there, and having that relationship with the AI systems makes a lot of sense.
So let's jump back to you kind of touched on it, the human in the loop segment. So I think that's obviously priority for you folks as a business now. Like, what are some of the reasonings behind why you haven't gone fully automated? I guess like where you're bringing human into the loop for decision making process. Would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, let me share a little of our perspective there. And there's different places that you could, people could have different opinions here, right? You mentioned like the example like Claude Code, right, where you could ask it to generate, perform some action. It will generate a plan, ask you, do you like the plan? It kind of immediately engages you on, do you want to redirect or right like that? For us, we take the opinion. It's more of a, the analyst is kind of on the loop here, so they can influence things. But in general, we're going to process every alert autonomously, right? We're going to investigate each case, and by the time it gets to a person, right, it's going to have an opinion from Embed, whether that's, hey, this is something I think you need to look at. This is something I'm not sure, so you should take a look, or hey, there's a threat here, I believe. Um, that we just think that's practical, just given the volume of data that's out there now. So I think that's an important part. I think kind of what I mentioned there about being, upfront with what you know and what you don't know, and where, you say, hey, this is I don't have enough data to make a full judgment on this, is something that we believe is important too. So that's, part of when to engage a person, right? It's not just the case that you believe something is bad. It might just be that that there are gaps in your knowledge, and that that's the time to pull somebody in.
I like the fact that you're not necessarily dictating what a business should or shouldn't do. I do think that's like, every business has its own risk appetite. Every business has its own priority of like, okay, like we're ready to let that run. Because right now we've got 10 million in contracts that we need to spend we've got a 2-person security team. We need to go spend our time over here. There's a 7% chance that this goes wrong. So I actually do like the fact that you're not whilst you're making a reasonable judgment, it is not on you to immediately shift attention. So I don't really have a question there, but I will say that I do like the fact that you are not dictating to business what is the right outcome, because as much as you can spend time with your stakeholders and teams or whatever, like that's not your call. So I like that, and I respect that, and I hope that sticks around in a lot of businesses, because otherwise we're wiping databases like we've seen everywhere else, because it's the right thing to do because it's more efficient.
Yeah, that's right. I definitely think that it can't be a one size fits all for everybody, right? It's got to be each organization has its own policies that if you're trying to have one solution for everybody, you're not going to meet anybody's full needs, and that definitely drives our approach too.
So maybe Seth, I'll direct the question towards you, and this is going to be, if you're a security leader today and you're trying to tackle this moment, there's a lot of confusion in the market right now around what good looks like. So I'd love to get your guys' perspective on like, what are the ingredients that make an effective detection and response program in this moment where you can lean as hard as you want into autonomous systems or just automated systems, kind of skewed more classic SOAR somewhere else. But there's a lot of top layer noise happening, but there's these principles underneath that can really help guide a security leader who's in the midst of a rebuild or scale up. How should we be thinking about this, of building world-class detection and response in this moment?
I think that a lot of the building blocks are still very similar, right? I think it's just where you need to invest human resources and where you can leverage AI and ML to help you do some of that. So, for example, I think traditionally, like threat hunting teams, and even to some extent, threat detection engineering teams have been sort of reserved for organizations that are either much more mature or they're much larger and can pull that in. I think now organizations can have those and be much smaller, and they can leverage and take advantage of that type of stuff. I think also leveraging solutions like AI SOC gives you the ability to say, hey, like I can offload here while I then go build up over there. And so I would say for a threat detection program, I think you definitely need the ability to be able to do investigation. If you're not doing that, if you're not looking at anything, right? If you have no visibility into your network, you're not going to see what's going wrong. I think that threat hunting is a great way to kind of get ahead of things and be able to see what's coming, but that's typically reserved for more mature organizations. And then I think detection engineering is a great way to customize for your organization, right? Otherwise, you're just getting off the shelf stuff that whatever the company gives you from a detection perspective.
Do you see there's a convergence of these as the technology gets better? Do you see threat hunting being democratized and detection response being easier and like instant response? Do you see a convergence happening here, or do you think they'll continue to be separate disciplines?
No, it is since the very beginning when we first did our VC pitches and stuff. It's for us, it's been a convergence, right? So we believe that that the investigation piece is building that foundation. Once you have all the investigation pieces, you then can start to help on the detection engineering. You can help on the threat hunting side of things, and it's one system that is able to leverage all of that context and knowledge across all of those. So I definitely think there's a convergence of those.
If you do see a convergence in this, it's going to unlock a lot of capabilities for security teams that have historically been hidden behind a barrier with time, talent, and treasure. Like it's just been too expensive or it's too complicated. So it's kind of an interesting and exciting world to be in cybersecurity, which cuts right against this narrative of like, the world is over because AI is going to take my job. I'm like, well, actually, your job's going to be way more interesting if you could finally do the stuff that you've always wanted to do. And like, here it is. Like, take my analysts and get them on autonomous threat hunts. I start working with an AI on that. So
I always think that narrative is quite interesting because we're assuming that we're tackling 2024's like attackers, right? So it's like, okay, well, my security team today with AI can take care of yesterday's attackers, but like on the other side of the fence, like this job is only going to get harder, and we're actually only going to need more. I hate using the term like people power, not manpower, but like we're only going to need the most advanced systems, and then like the game is changing every week. So I think like obviously this was again going to give away of when we recorded this, but like not a great weekend for cybersecurity stocks. But personally, I don't buy it. I think this job is only going to get harder, and we're going to need a continuous evolution of products and evolution of people to tackle tomorrow's threats. So again, like we go back to that like supercharged analyst. Like every person in a defense team is just going to have to be. It's just a retooling of weapons, and we're going from knives to guns, right? Is kind of the way I'm looking at it. Like we're going from really brutal, ugly warfare to like, all right, this is pretty crazy. And that's the period we're in right now.
Yeah. I think it's still interesting to kind of see where it's going to go, but I do feel like as defenders, this is one of the best advantages we've been given. I do feel like the advantage, having worked both sides of the coin of offense and defensive security. I find offensive security super fun, but I also kind of find it a little bit easier than like the defensive side of things. And so this is the first time I feel like we've been given a set of tools that's going to allow us to change the way we operate and really hopefully help us change some of the calculus around what it's like to defend our networks. But I agree, it's never going to be easy. But what I do think it does is potentially shift us into an area where we as the security analyst can spend more of our time on what I think is the fun parts of stuff rather than having to sift through all of the not fun stuff to then get to the fun stuff.
Totally. So let's dive into the unit economics of this, because to your point, if I'm the analyst and I'm spending 3 hours a day just figuring out what's important, what a god awful way to spend your day, right? Like nobody wants that. We need to be focused on that. So I've seen some reports and citations that Embed's platform and the things that you guys are building are like reducing false positives in the direction of like 90%. Like this really incredible reduction in false positives, ultimately like saving 155 hours per month in analyst time. Fact check me if I'm okay using that. Like, what's your take on that to align with the research you guys are seeing in your customer base? But I also want to get your perspective on this. Like, what would you expect an analyst to do with that time? And I've got a follow-up question, which is going to get us into like impacts across the industry. But like, if you have an analyst today and we're reducing the false positive rate to something of that magnitude, where do you want those analysts spending their time?
Yeah, maybe I could talk about the beginning part of this, and Seth, you might add more at the end. So from my perspective, we want people when they're first kind of experiencing Embed, to look at all of the alerts that they can, right? Look at what you're doing today. Even if we think this is benign or this is malicious, or we're not sure. Take a look at that. Check our reasoning. Get comfortable with this. I think trust is like step one of the process, right? And so over time, obviously that shifts, but I think that's kind of a big step that people need to get comfortable before they kind of turn their eye away a little more, right, from the things that we're telling them are the benign. We do have customers, Connor, that are at those metrics that you gave there, right? The 90%, the 155 hours a month. So I think, once people establish that trust in the system, and it kind of lets them, refocus in other areas, I think, Seth, what are the things that you would say, or where we want them to go next?
I think you really want them to move more into the proactive parts of it, right? Alert triage is a very reactive kind of a job, right? It's an important job, but like it's a very reactive job. So if we could take 90% of that reactive job off of your plate, that should free you up to then start doing much more of that proactive type of work. And hopefully in that proactive type of work, you're actually reducing the risk of your organization, right? Imagine you're spending time on like a shifted left type of TTP where it's like, hey, this is them, the first stages of them trying to get in. This isn't them exfilling data, right? And so if you can start to tackle problems in that arena, lock things down better earlier, like more of a continuous approach to that, I think is really where you would want to spend your time as a security organization.
So, what do you think this does to the larger market when it comes to MSSPs and MDR? I'd love some hot takes on this because I'm someone who's just like having tried to solve these problems at scale. It's very difficult. It's very expensive. When you get into the side of MDRs and MSSPs, like people are the number one constraining cost for the growth of those businesses. I could imagine a world where if I could remove 90% of the false positives, and now I have this analyst who's really focused on the 10% that matters, I can now have this one analyst understanding multiple environments in different contexts and getting into a deeper, ultimately, a more profitable service. Do you guys see a world where MSSPs and MDR start picking this up and start rethinking how service is delivered? Or am I just kind of off by myself?
I think this flips the script for MSSPs and MDRs. Like I think I think it completely changes the way that they do business. Either one, they need to start lowering the cost, or two, they're going to need to start offering more services along with what they have. I think MSSPs and MDRs that aren't moving in the direction of leveraging tools like Embed or are just going to get left behind. I truly believe that.
I think this is actually one of the benefits that we haven't really talked about yet is that, to your point, the costs can come down. This can be deflationary in this security. And as consumers of security services, we could spend less year over year on a security capability and maintain quality. I'm like, that's a novel concept in the security market.
I do think it will take some time. I think we'll get some corporate America greediness for a little bit. We can raise margins from what to what. I think those companies will get found out, but it's interesting. We had Mike Privet, who is he released his like cyber report, and actually the amount of like investment and like M&A activity, a lot of it was cyber services, because they're looking at this and going, okay, like some pretty fat margins that we can look at here. I think you're right. It will get found out pretty quickly, but we're also like, the truth is we deal with a fairly uneducated is not fair. But like, I don't think people are necessarily aware of the unit economics that go into a lot of these processes. And so like, I think as that education starts to rise, you'll either see prices come down or some pretty ugly Reddit threats.
Yeah, 100% agree that I think that is the trajectory this will take, that people will just naturally feel the pressure to drop prices on that, right? Given the margins that are there. I think that'll really be the first time that you see people kind of putting their money where their mouth is, on this one, and that'll be a good thing for the industry.
I was working with a CISO the other week, and he and I were talking this through, and he was literally at this point. He's like, Connor, I can go to this third party MDR where I'm going to get like their traditional brick and mortar kind of experience. It's like, I can go do that. But if I do that, I know what I'm going to get. I know what it's going to cost me. Or I can spend 9 months with Claude Code and I can really try and build this myself. Ultimately, we work to something in the middle. But like, that's an interesting moment that you could have a security leader who can look at this, open up the spreadsheet and say, like, what makes more sense over a 3-year plan? Do I go with a traditional player or do I lean in on AI? Because yeah, there might be, if you got, in his case, he was trying to like build his own. And it's like, his year one costs were about the same, but year 2 and 3, it was so much cheaper to do the AI as he was modeling it out. So yeah, the economics of threat detection are shifting pretty aggressively, which is a positive thing. I think it's really positive because, Seth, to your point, there's the alternative here is that costs don't come down, but value goes up. There's more capabilities off the capability matrix that we can give to a mid-market security team, who's under already cost pressure. So I think that's exciting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, gentlemen, I want to kind of circle back on a question I asked earlier, which was, as that security leader, like the one I was just describing, if they were going to evaluate building AI for detection response and bringing in and building out the right scaffolding and building out the right systems for this, and going back to those ingredients, like we talked about a little bit of chain of reasoning. You guys just mentioned how important that is, like that building trust over time. I'm going to circle back on that in a second, but we've also talked about like the need for context, the need for feedback from analysts. But one thing I wanted to get your perspective on was AI models. Do generic off-the-shelf AI with a bit of tuning, bit of context, are we finding that they are good enough, or do we really need to start thinking about domain-specific reasoning models here? So I was going to get your perspective on like, do you need unique models, or are these off-the-shelf reasoning models with just the right scaffolding around it the right way to go? As a nerd in the room, I'd love to get a perspective on that.
Yeah, maybe I'll share kind of my 2 cents on this one. So, having been around agents for a long time, I'm kind of opinionated on this one. So,
Opinions are good. We'll take them.
I think it's interesting. It's an interesting question. You mentioned like cybersecurity stocks dropping, right? Given certain announcements and things like that. People is directly tied to what you're asking here, right? Do we have the right models and we just need to plug them in with the right infrastructure here around it? I mean, I'm still of the mind at this point, Connor, that absolutely not. That, like, domain specific models are really important at this point. There's a number of reasons for that, and I also think how you organize, the tools that are available to those models is still a space that is really important to get, accurate and reliable results. It's not enough just to take all the MCP servers that are out there and expose it to your agent and let it figure out how to use those all intelligently. That's just kind of overwhelming, the agents today, and you don't get reliable results on those. The other way to think about it too is, the data that these models have been trained on, um, is not the same type of data that we deal with in security. And so expecting that, um, the reasoning that you get out of these models to kind of align with how a security analyst thinks is not, is not where we're at. So I think, for people who are kind of interested in trying this out for themselves and, hey, can I build this myself? I think you kind of get some interesting results right away. But I think, getting it to align with your reasoning, at the level that you want these systems performing is a hard problem. And really, that's where I think models that are tuned for the security use case are going to be key for this.
And where do folks go to get these models? It's a simple. I know it's a strange question, but like, do you think is there going to be a community of cybersecurity related models that are on Hugging Face that if you wanted to go roll your own, like you'd go grab those, or is this really these domain specific models only going to be made available through research oriented companies like yourself?
Yeah, and I can't say I know exactly how this is going to play out. I mean, certainly, that's our perspective is that we'll invest in that because we think it's important for the quality of the product that we offer at Embed. I think there's already some domain specific models, but how much those are being kept up and improved over time is what are the economics to making that a thing for somebody to continue to do. I'm not sure. I wouldn't kind of hold my breath on that one. I'd be more of the, look for companies like ours or others that are, cybersecurity based and, what they're doing to kind of build the necessary models to allow that, to kind of bake that into the models and provide it as part of their capabilities. Feels like the more realistic path at this point.
That makes sense. I mean, it is really hard to find time to do your day job. It's really, really hard to find time to do your day job and train a model that's going to help you do your day job. So that makes sense.
I would say real quick, just one of the things that I've seen in this space is that as like a security researcher, we can kind of go and we can throw a few things against a general model and it'll come back with some answers that we're like, yeah, that seems right. That seems kind of cool. And like feel like, oh, I could go build this. I could do this. And I think that's what differentiates like what, Jeff has built and the thought that he's put into the architecture is I can throw it against there and kind of get the right answer once or twice here and there. But can I really build something that I'm going to get the right answer when I try to do it at scale and get that consistency and that transparency and reliability that he was talking about? I think that's what really differentiates a lot of these solutions. And it's really hard to see on the surface.
In my experience, and first of all, I want to go back to like, do you trust the outcome, right? Like it's a keyword in security. Like if you don't trust the outcome, like what's the point anyway? Like if you're like, yeah, this looks pretty good, but actually I have to go and check every piece of reasoning anyway, which is a lot of work, like arguably more work than even trying. So it's like, so you don't trust the outcome. But my thought process around building almost anything, and I've tried to build almost everything, is it can get me 97, 98% of the way there. And it looks good, feels good, smells good, but it's just not quite there where you can trust it to really let go. And so I'm like, cool. And everyone, SaaS is dead is the popular thing to say right now. And it's like, cool, wait until this screws up or doesn't integrate or whatever. And it's like, you got no one to blame, no one to call. And like most people don't understand the architecture of what they're building with generic models anyway. So they don't know where to go and fix things. And that's a lot of what I found with the generic models is like, I really want it to be all the way there. And the feedback loop is like, yeah, like, oh my God, look at this. And then something creaks at some point. And that's kind of what I've run into a lot as a non-technical user, because I don't know how to go in and fix a line of code or debug or something like that. So then I have to bring a grown-up in and they tell me that I have to re-architect the entire thing and it's going to cost $9 million. So that's happened to me twice thus far. But I think like going back to it, if you don't trust the outcome of what, and this goes back to like, but you are trusting what Jeff and you folks are putting out, like that's the differentiator, right? Is these like very deliberate purpose-built models that you can say with utmost, and again, because there's human in the loop, you can say with utmost confidence that you trust your product's decision to give this recommendation, not to do. And like it is like you have with 100% confidence that you trust the reason behind why it's saying what it's saying and why it's showing what it's saying versus like, hey, yeah, like Claude went for a walk and found this or whatever. Like that's the difference, right? It goes back to it. And it's always going to be trust in our industry.
Yeah, that's spot on. So, and that really goes back to kind of the way we evaluate the system internally, right? Is, we focus it on, is it getting to the right answer? Is it doing it reliably? Is it giving the reasoning that a security analyst would give or not, right? You can get the right answer, but if you can't get there the right way, then people aren't going to trust it. And like you said, they're going to have to go back over and check our work, in which case you lose a lot of the value, right, of what we're trying to do here. So I think it's really important for people to kind of focus on, each of those problems. And if they're building systems in this space and thinking about how am I capturing, my best analysts and what their, their thought process on this, and the results I'm getting out, are these aligning? And if not, what do I need to change in order to make that happen? That's the kind of thing people need to be thinking about.
So I'm really interested in this space because it's one of the most mission critical parts of a security organization. We had one of our guests early in the podcast, Iman Ganazada, and he came on and he built autonomic security for Google and such. And he had this point of view that like security, like the real value add you have is right before a threat actor shows up in your environment, all the way through handling the breach. Like it's right in that moment. Like all the preventative work, it's like actually it's engineering who should be fixing that stuff or it's compliance team. And it's like, so detection response is incredibly important capability.
His opinion was stronger than that. He said it will be the only remaining pillar. Like it was, hey, it's the only real value left in security. If all of this plays out the way it's supposed to, it is the last remaining pillar in security. So like, and for sure the most integral piece, right? Like how do you stop it? But then when it does hit the fan, what do you do?
Yeah. So my question says exactly, Steve's right. I'm always softening things. Like, yes, he was very adamant on his perspective there.
Yeah.
So Jeff or Seth, maybe you can help me here. Like, if I'm going to walk over and talk to a security leader after today's call, and they're like, Connor, help me think through detection response for the future. And I say, oh, trust is really important in whatever platform. How do they measure that? How do we go from, I agree with the idea, to I'm ready to let go of my SOAR platform and having my analyst run down a sheet of paper that says I always do this and then I check this, and move to these kind of AI forward agentic systems for detection response? What are some like other metrics, key pillars, points of evidence that a security leader should be looking for today to know that they're on the right track as they mature their program?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll give you one, and maybe Seth, you've got some other ideas here too. But with our customers that we're working with now, right? We encourage them, like, give us the feedback here, right? You have that capability in the tool now, right? That's part of establishing the trust in it, right? It's one thing to kind of look at it each day, but it's another thing to step back a month later and be like, how many times did I agree with what they were saying? How many times did I disagree with it? Is it getting better as it's, understanding my environment more? I think that's a kind of an easy one for people to do, right? It doesn't require too much time once you've looked at this to give that little bit of feedback. I guess other thoughts, Seth?
I would say that's definitely the primary one, right? Like if it's not going down, how often you disagree with it, like the system isn't learning and isn't getting better. Like one of the ways I like to describe it is that these systems should be able to take that context, right? I like to describe it sometimes as tribal knowledge, right? The analyst comes in, it takes them, years to learn a bunch of this stuff, and then they leave. And it's not just them leaving and the resources associated, it's that context and that knowledge. So you should be able to get a lot of value out of, your AI SOC right on day one, but it should also continuously be getting better as it's learning how you want something investigated, or that it's okay for this person to come in from a VPN or log in from this location or that location, but somebody else should not be, or they're on vacation. Like, right. So like if it's not starting to learn those things, and you're just constantly saying no to the same things, I think that's where you would build that, like, well, I don't know if I trust this system as much as I should, or I don't know that it's getting me the value that I want. But like Jeff said, it needs to be transparent. The system needs to be transparent so that way you can see why, because just getting the right answer is not really enough, right? Like you want to, or at least I do, when I sit down as an analyst, I want to see it get the right answer, but then I also want to look at what it did and say like, oh yeah, it did pull this context. It did pull this, ask this question. And based on this, I do agree it is bad. If it's not doing that, then it's hard to build that trust.
Do you have a customer story that you're like most proud of where they're like, they called you, and this might not be your biggest deal, but one where you've walked away and you're like, wow, like we got someone out of hot water, or we really transformed the way they look at security? Is there one that stands out that sticks with you? And I just say the customer name by any means, but one that like really you're like, wow, like feel good factor on that one.
I think I have a couple things. I think, one of the things I really liked was with what we just talked about, that workflow of understanding their environment. We definitely had a customer with, who our model in the beginning might say, hey, this looks suspicious to me. We had an automated workflow that said, hey, this is an approved application in your environment that was learned, something that they could easily see. We demonstrated that to them in the next meeting. Hey, here were examples in this last week that looked like this, and automatically got kind of removed from your view. They loved it, and then they went in themselves and kind of added on top of it, because part of our system, we let people kind of control that knowledge, that memory that's associated with their environment. And the fact they did that, and the next day already had results to share with us, I thought that was a great kind of testament to, like, yeah, this is we're on to something good here.
So, gentlemen, I want to give us a quick lightning round as we wrap up here. You guys have been really generous with your time. And so I want to get some perspectives. You guys are on the defense side, but we also know the offense is happening as well. Threat actors are adopting AI, they're changing their capabilities, they're improving, they're reducing the costs of attack. So I'll just go with Seth, and then we'll go Jeff, and to get your perspectives on this. But like, Seth, when you think about the threat actor that's going to be around in 12 to 18 months, and you have to sit in a room full of security leaders, what is the advice that you are giving them to prepare for what's coming their way?
So I think that from an attacker perspective, they can move much faster now with less knowledge, right? And so I think that creates a different scenario than what we have to deal with today. How would I tell them to prepare for that? I think that the way that they're protecting their environment is still not all that different, right? Like, it hasn't necessarily changed the shape of malware. It hasn't changed the way an exploit comes across. It hasn't changed the fact that somebody can send you a phishing email to get your credentials. I think that the text is way better now than it used to be, but like, ultimately the actual avenues to get in haven't changed all that much. So I would encourage them to continue to invest in those areas where they're protecting against. Every environment is different. So like, one organization may need to invest in one area versus another. But I think they still just need to invest in that. I don't think they need some newfangled like detection device, I guess is what I'm saying.
Got it. Okay, so we're getting a lot more of the same. It's just going to come in faster and with sharper points.
That's what I think.
All right, Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I'd say acceleration, right? This is going to keep accelerating, as we move on, right? One of the cool things from an AI perspective is that, these build on top of each other, right? As we get these capabilities, and we can leverage them, and kind of build on top of it. This is just going to keep going faster. So, invest on the defensive side now, right? Because offensive side is going to keep growing too, their capabilities.
Well, Seth, Jeff, just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. And for those listening, Seth is the co-founder and CEO of Embed Security. Jeff is the co-founder and CTO. They launched Embed in 2024 after careers spanning NSA, FireEye, Mandiant, Google, and Meta. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure having the podcast tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.